Chapter 4. What Blooms in Thaw. The first day of April arrived with a fanfare of birdsong and church bells. The town hummed with life as snowmelt coursed through gutters and splashed from eaves. Men removed coats they'd worn for 3 years straight. Women hung linens on lines strung between budding maples. Children abandoned sleds for marbles and jump ropes, their laughter mingling with the fragrance of awakening soil, a promise written in scent instead of words. Rosalind stood at the threshold, breathing deeply of that promise. Her canvas gardening apron covered a navy dress with mother-of-pearl buttons at the cuffs, its hemline modestly grazing her mid-calf. For warmth, she draped a cream-colored wool cardigan around her shoulders. The thermometer outside read 45 degrees, a temperature not seen since 1921. 45 miraculous degrees. Behind her, the foxglove spires stood tall, their bell-shaped blooms multiplying daily. The valerian stretched toward the glass ceiling, already promising a summer harvest for Dr. Caldwell's insomnia patients. Yet it was the silver flower that drew her most often. True wisdom wasn't between logic and intuition, but in honoring both, letting each inform the other in a dance as old as womankind. Planted at dawn the day after her midnight meeting with Edmund Winterborne, it had grown into a flower that neither her botanical training nor her grandmother's notes could explain. The stem reached a foot tall, straight as a young pine, with leaves resembling hypnotic patterns of filigree. The bloom itself remained closed, a perfect oval of petals edged in the faintest blue. "Thinking of him again?" Mrs. Barrett asked, arriving at Rosalind's side with an inviting cup of Earl Grey tea with sugar and milk. Rosalind accepted the cup. "Thinking of what to write in my notes, actually." Not exactly the truth, but the best she could come up with. She nodded toward her open journal on the potting table, where detailed observations filled pages far beyond what scientific documentation required. "I can't classify the flower. It matches no known genus. The cellular structure under the microscope," she glanced down, then back up, "differs from anything I've ever seen." "Does that bother you, not knowing?" Rosalind drank a slow, thoughtful sip of tea, the steam curling around her face. "Our professors at Smith College taught that everything in nature can be cataloged and measured. However," a hummingbird hovered near the glass, drawn by the riot of color inside, and she paused to watch it. "I've questioned whether some truths aren't meant to be categorized, if the unknown might be part of God's design." "Your grandmother would have said exactly that." Mrs. Barrett gestured toward the well. "The deepest truths are the ones you feel rather than prove." The telephone's shrill ring interrupted their contemplation. Mrs. Barrett disappeared to answer it, returning moments later with a curious expression. "It's President Halstead." She handed Rosalind her journal. "He says the matter requires immediate attention." Rosalind hesitated. Since declining the college's offer nearly a month ago, she'd had no contact with Greenfield's academic community. President Halstead's farewell had made it clear he considered her choice a betrayal of scientific progress. What could be so urgent now? In the study, she set down her cup of tea and lifted the receiver. "Hello, sir. Hearing from you is unexpected." "Miss Drew? The specimens you provided, the foxglove variants? Our laboratory has isolated a compound with remarkable properties, more effective than any digitalis formulation we've seen, with significantly reduced toxicity." Her gaze drifted to where those same plants thrived. "You bring good news." "This is revolutionary. The hospital is reporting unprecedented success with cardiac patients." His tone lowered. The board wants to discuss a better arrangement, a collaboration with you. Your conservatory would remain independent while we provide support and distribution networks." "I see." Rosalind redirected her attention to the window. The mill whistle had sounded that morning, summoning workers to report earlier as machinery thawed and production quickened. On Federal Street, shopkeepers washed windows and swept porches, preparing for customers. The town was re-emerging, exactly as Edmund promised. Edmund, not Mr. Winterborne. His name felt intimate on her tongue. She'd spoken it aloud only once. "Miss Drew, are you still there?" President Halstead asked. "Yes." "We're aware that our university isn't the only institution interested. Apparently, word of your botanical achievements is spreading, and yesterday a gentleman from Boston inquired about your methods." "Did he leave his name?" "Winterborne, I believe. Distinguished fellow, though rather unorthodox in his approach. He was remarkably familiar with your work, mentioned an existing arrangement between you two." Edmund had actually visited the university, introducing himself as a colleague from Boston. The thought that he stepped into her academic sphere sent a flutter of curiosity through her veins. "He's a consultant on certain projects," she managed, aware the description fell laughably short of the complex man Edmund Winterborne was proving to be. "Please communicate to the board that I'll consider their offer and respond next week." After hanging up the phone, Rosalind walked to the well. Their renewed interest was a victory, validation that her grandmother's methods carried value worth preserving. But Edmund's visit to the university revealed her midnight meeting was expanding beyond their private conversations in ways she had yet to fully comprehend. Partnership, he'd called it. She knelt beside the silver flower, notebook in hand, recording the measurements for the third time that day. 2 inches taller than yesterday, 27 leaves in number. The petals spiraled outward, conforming to the natural rhythm of growth, as though they adhered to nature's hidden code. Facts, data, the language of science, precise and comforting in its clarity. However, tending the flower was more than gardening. It was a test of devotion, patience, and faith that would determine not only the seasons, but she was starting to think of her own heart's future. As she shut her notebook, she twisted at the flicker of movement, and any observations fled from her mind, scattering as birds startled into flight. Edmund was standing there. April light transformed his platinum hair to burnished ivory, revealing nuances she hadn't noticed before. Silhouetted against the landscape, his fair complexion gave him a luminous quality, reminding her of the great white bears her father had described on his northern travels. Rare, powerful, yet unexpectedly gentle. Edmund didn't see her. Instead, a honeybee hovering near a flower captured his attention, and he extended his palm beneath a struggling insect. The bee rested on his hand, its tiny wings glistening. He brought it closer with an expression of such tender concentration that Rosalind held her breath. "The first of the season," he murmured. "Brave little navigator." Carefully, he transferred the bee to an opened blossom, his fingertips lingering protectively until the creature found its footing. Only then did he look up. The smile that crossed his face when he saw her, unguarded and honest, brought an openness to his usually controlled expression. A familiar sensation prickled along her arms. Her body recognized his presence, as though an invisible current announced him. "You have a talent for appearing suddenly," she observed. "I understand the layout of places like this," he explained. "My family's been studying conservatories and gardens for decades. You learn to move efficiently, where to step, which paths connect. Most people don't pay attention to these things." For a fleeting moment, Rosalind glimpsed what he was when not bound by formality. His impeccably tailored charcoal suit gave way to a lighter gray waistcoat over a white shirt, the top button undone as though the warmer weather had convinced him to unbend, if only slightly. "Mr. Winterborne." She clutched her notebook with deliberate calm. "In other words, I wasn't expecting you." "Edmund, remember?" "I promised to visit, to see what grows from our partnership." He gestured to the silver flower. "Magnificent. It responds well to your care." "What type of flower is it?" she asked. "None of my botanical references contain anything remotely similar." "That's because the flower doesn't exist in any botanical records." She'd had weeks to rationalize their midnight agreement, to treat it as symbolic. Science and faith coexisted in her mind, but he hinted at more. "You speak in riddles, Edmund." He lifted a brow. "Do I?" "Yes." She exhaled, searching for firmer ground, a concrete landmark. "President Halstead phoned me. He mentioned you visited the university and said you introduced yourself as being from Boston." Edmund straightened, his handsome face revealing nothing. "The research on your foxglove specimens shows promise. They're beginning to understand what your grandmother knew through intuition. Plants cultivated with purpose carry healing beyond their natural properties." This man who spoke of her grandmother with such knowledge, who appeared and disappeared with the elusiveness of morning mist, who was privy to facts no stranger could know. "Who are you? Really?" "I am following my father and grandfather's path. They studied nature as I do." His words were firm, though vulnerable, in a tone she hadn't heard before. "I've kept myself apart from others for so long that I forget what it means to truly relate to another person. Until you." He selected a single bud from a rose bush, its petals barely parting, to reveal a glimpse of pink color. He broke the stem with a gentle twist and offered it to Rosalind without ceremony, yet the gesture carried more weight than elaborate phrases could have expressed. Her breath caught. "For you," he said. "Beauty, recognizing beauty." Her pulse fluttered with the intimacy of his words, the way his deep voice wrapped around her. She hesitated for the briefest moment before accepting the rose, her fingers grazing his. "Thank you." She breathed in the fragrance, faint sweet, a secret whispered only for her. For a heartbeat, the burden of logic and reason slipped away. With deliberate care, she tucked the rose in her hair, the petals resting against her dark curls. She didn't meet his gaze. Her heart was too full, her thoughts too tangled. Instead, she smoothed her skirts, an old habit, an anchor to keep from floating too far into the unknown. "It's lovely, thank you," she murmured, though the words were too small for what these seconds had become. United, they entered the conservatory. Sunlight streamed through glass, bearing the ghost patterns of frost, casting rainbow prisms across Edmund's face, with its flawless blend of strength and refinement. Life demands cycles, withdrawal and expansion, dormancy and growth. The world tries to circumvent these rhythms with machinery and electricity, with chemicals and conveniences. He stepped so close that she noticed the fine tailoring of his waistcoat and the crisp, natural scent that clung to him. He stood at ease, his confident presence filling the glass-walled space without overwhelming it. "What do I contribute to all this?" Rosalind asked. "Trust what can't always be explained. Tend this garden with both scientific understanding and perception." He eyed her notebook. "By documenting what is measurable and appreciating what is not, you honor both." In the town, people were reacquainting themselves with forgotten rhythms, merchants arranging window displays, horses clip-clopping down Main Street, families planting gardens where snowdrifts had stood. The fine homes of mill owners and bankers lined Federal Street, their grand facades built of red brick or white clapboard, with tall windows and sweeping porches adorned with ornate railings. Gas lamps flanked their front steps. "May I show you something?" Edmund asked. "The silver flower has cousins in the meadow. Will you accompany me?" Rosalind paused. "I need to record all the evening measurements within the hour." "Measurements can wait." He offered his hand, ungloved this time, long fingers marked with the faint calluses of someone accustomed to working outdoors, a striking contrast to the tailored lines of his suit. "Some things are better experienced, Miss Drew." She grinned. "If we're to be partners, please call me Rosalind." An emotion beyond description flickered in his eyes. "Rosalind," he said, her name on his lips sounding as both question and answer. She placed her hand on his outstretched palm, her senses sharpened to details previously overlooked, the precise pressure of his fingers, the unexpected strength beneath his tenderness, the contrast of their joined hands against the vibrant green of spring growth. Some connections arrive not with fanfare, but with certainty, changing everything while appearing to change nothing at all. "Mrs. Barrett," she called toward the main house, "I'm going out for a while." The housekeeper came in the doorway, nodding at Edmund with surprising nonchalance, as if mysterious gentlemen appeared regularly in the conservatory. "Don't forget your coat, dear. Spring it may be, but the evening will hold winter's memory." Rosalind fumbled for her wool coat hanging by the door, but Edmund moved first. He lifted it from its hook, holding it open for her with a courteous grace. As she slipped her arms into the sleeves, his hands glided to her shoulders while settling the garment into place, a fleeting touch that made her grateful for the coat's high collar, hiding the flush rising to her cheeks. Mrs. Barrett's perceptive grin followed them as Edmund tipped his head in acknowledgement before escorting Rosalind through the doorway. Rosalind cast a backward glance, puzzled by the housekeeper's easy acceptance of Edmund. Had they met before? Had her grandmother mentioned him in conversations Rosalind hadn't been privy to? Mrs. Barrett kept many confidences, and this was another question in a growing collection that Edmund Winterborne inspired. Whatever the explanation, their silent understanding conveyed shared knowledge. The air brought a symphony of scents Rosalind had forgotten: wet earth, tender sprouts, the mineral tang of melting snow. The path revealed itself in rustic stone steps, winding down the hillside toward the woods. Edmund walked beside her, his strides slowing to match hers. "Your town prospers with the thaw." His tone held a surprising wistfulness, his emphasis on your, suggesting a desire to claim connection to the town. "This is more than weather. This is hope. People believing in tomorrow." He spoke of places beyond Greenfield with vivid clarity, conservatories built of materials no modern architect could name, so that she could see these sanctuaries in her mind's eye. She glanced at his profile, the strong, clean line of his jaw, the classic nose, the firm mouth that seemed carved for authority, yet had shown interest and kindness. In repose, his face might have belonged on an ancient coin, timeless and arrestingly masculine. "Did you bring spring, or did spring follow the end of a bargain?" she asked. Nature herself was eager, waiting only for someone with trust enough to believe in renewal. They crested a slight rise, and Rosalind stopped and gasped. Before them stretched a meadow she'd known all her life, where she'd gathered wildflowers as a child, where her father had taught her to identify bird calls on summer evenings, Spring had transformed the ordinary landscape into a breathtaking expanse of color. Thousands of crocuses blanketed the ground in waves of purple and gold. Their petals opened to catch the last of the light. Among them grew snowdrops, their nodding white heads mirroring the silver flower. The effect was magical. The stars themselves had descended to bloom across the hillside. "How?" she whispered. "Abundance follows belief," he replied. Wildflowers swayed, drawn to him. "What you've nurtured has sent ripples far beyond its walls. This is only the beginning." They walked a few more steps in relaxed silence before he spoke again. "I've heard that your grandmother regularly spoke of God's hand. I've observed that you do as well. Is that unusual?" "In my experience, those with scientific training often separate their faith from their research. They compartmentalize God for Sundays, science for weekdays, yet you move between them with such ease." "They're not separate. Science helps me understand God's creation. Faith helps me understand why." She gestured toward the meadow. "Look at the mathematical precision in these petals, the seamless timing of their emergence after the thaw. Doesn't the same creator who designed such intricate systems act in ways beyond our understanding?" He bent to examine a snowdrop. "My family has cultivated awareness of natural patterns for generations, though we rarely discuss their origin or purpose." He hesitated. "Does your faith provide those answers?" "Not all," she admitted. "Some mysteries are lived rather than solved." He straightened. "I've never considered faith from that perspective before." Dewdrops created tiny prisms at their feet, and the perfume of thousands of blooms rose around them. "Nature's own incense," she murmured. He smiled. "Besides being interested in botany, I am a musician. Music fascinates me because it conforms to specific patterns, major and minor chords built on thirds. Debussy's compositions are some of my favorites. He experimented with whole tone scales." Grandmother often played Debussy in the evenings, Claire de Lune more than any other. Rosalind knelt, fingering a crocus petal, the silk-soft texture cool against her skin. "These crocuses, they're weeks early." Edmund didn't answer. Instead, he turned her hand palm up before placing a single blossom there. His thumb traced the curve of her wrist. "Perhaps they knew you'd come." "These flowers were here in the garden, waiting for me." "Why not?" Her breath hitched, his touch a gentle caress. She closed her fingers around the blossom, steadying herself. "He gave me a flower," she told herself. Nothing more. "I doubt flowers concern themselves with such matters as waiting for humans," she joked. He smiled. "Ah, but perhaps they do." She composed herself with practiced ease, retreating into the comfort of logic. "The university wishes a collaboration with me. They've discovered the medicinal properties of the foxglove variants and calling it revolutionary." "What will you tell them?" "I'll notify them by next week." Edmund helped her rise, and she swept the soil from her coat. "I want the conservatory to remain as my grandmother intended, serving both scientific advancement and community needs, a middle lane." "Some will call it compromise if you agree to their offer." "Let them. I'll make the final decision." Rosalind surveyed the wondrous meadow, thinking of her education, of faith and science, of tradition and progress. "You understand quickly, Rosalind Drew." His voice was intimate in the gathering dusk. "I'm drawn to you in ways I hadn't expected." A flush crept up her neck, betraying her. He ignited a feeling that had nothing to do with botany. "I usually withdraw when my work is complete." He scanned her face and lingered on her lips. "I don't form connections." And yet here you are, Rosalind said softly, showing me marvels in meadows. And yet here I am. What began as a visit has become something I look forward to. The sun sank below the horizon, shrouding the meadow in lavender twilight. Nightfall reminded her that the cold weather's departure was still new, and spring's hold was still tentative. We should return, she said reluctantly. Mrs. Barrett will worry. Edmund nodded, offering his arm. As they strolled back toward the Drew estate, lights appeared, squares of yellow against the deepening blue of evening. From this distance, the town resembled a constellation fallen to earth, each light a star marking a home, a family, a life being lived. "Will you come again?" Rosalind asked as they arrived at the conservatory. The question felt forward, improper even, yet necessary. "I am bound to our agreement." His formal words couldn't quite mask the personal note beneath them. "I will. Soon." Their gazes locked for a moment longer than propriety allowed, fragile as a crocus, potent as renewal. He turned, striding away. Soon he was gone, leaving her alone in a velvet silence. How she'd changed since meeting him. The woman who had once sought certainty in methodical classification embraced the unexpected as a facet of life's beauty. This was what her grandmother had meant about trusting God's timing. Seeds didn't reveal their purpose until spring thawed the ground. Church bells rang for evening service, no longer muffled by the snow's heavy hand. Rosalind stepped through the conservatory, touching each thriving plant. At the well, she filled the copper pitcher and breathed the same blessing she'd said countless times. For healing, for hope, for the glory of what grows in faithful hands. Then her pencil slid across her journal, recording changes in coloration and the asymmetry of recent growth. She added a message beneath the observations. April 15th, 1924. Today, I walked among miracles and speculated that the greatest wonder might be the gardener rather than the garden. As she watered each bed, Rosalind sensed what her grandmother must have known all along, that the most fertile ground lay neither in pure science nor in blind faith, but in the rich soil where both took root. Soon afterward, Rosalind dined with Mrs. Barrett for a late dinner in the sitting room. The experience with Edmund had left her thoughtful, her mind continuing to process the sights she'd witnessed. "You're quiet this evening," Mrs. Barrett observed, serving a meal of roast chicken and spring vegetables. "Yes, there's a lot to think about," Rosalind replied, accepting the plate gratefully. During dinner, Mrs. Barrett switched on the wireless radio, catching the final strains of Ain't We Got Fun. "They say Mr. Gershwin will perform live next week," she commented, adjusting the dial. The melody provided a stark difference to the experiences of the afternoon, securing Rosalind once again in the recognizable beats of 1924. A burst of static yielded to the smooth voice of the announcer. Then a jazz tune from Paul Whiteman's orchestra hummed through the speaker, its syncopated rhythm a sign of changing times. Between songs, news bulletins crackled. President Coolidge's latest speech, talk of the upcoming election, and the heated debates over prohibition enforcement. The newscaster mentioned Nellie Taylor Ross, poised to become the first woman governor. Mrs. Barrett adjusted the volume, lips pressing together at the mention of another speakeasy raid. The world was shifting, fast and uncertain, and the radio carried every bit straight into Rosalind's home. As she listened to the jazzy melodies, part of her awareness remained attuned to the flower and to Edmund. Was she developing feelings for him and the possibilities he represented? A future where faith and reason entwined as climbing roses on a trellis, each supporting the other? After dinner, Rosalind gathered the dishes. Mrs. Barrett protested, although Rosalind insisted on carrying the china and silverware into the kitchen, their common evening routine restored despite the events of the day. Upon re-entering the conservatory, she extinguished the lamps one by one, leaving only moonlight to bathe the glass-enclosed garden. Tomorrow promised new growth, new measurements, new discoveries, and perhaps another visit from Edmund Winterborne.